Welcome contenders, Guy here with a deck profile I used during Progenitor's Gambit. Summer in Quezon City basically puts a soft ban on Nanite Assassin, Kagan the Dragon, and all the Pestilence cards, so I had to build a new deck from scratch. The first deck idea I had was to play Black Torque. Torque plus Crimson Scales easily deals with the wide board of small cash cards and has Here Comes the Boom to clear the board. The black pieces are for Morak to search for specific cards like From the Shadows if I need big boy removal, gathering the 1cc Torques to go Torque Torque Boom to deal 12 to 14 damage, or bound cards just to resource. Sadly, when I was testing it, I did find a fatal flaw, which is if I don't see Crimson Scales or if it gets removed, the deck just falls apart quickly from the lack of draw power. So basically, my candidates for contenders boiled down to Major Dean, Krong, and Death. Major Dean also has his own problems, like being a steep uphill battle against Krong. I definitely did not have the patience to do Krong Mirror all day, which basically left me with Death. Death had a lot of support in the form of Bad Omen, From the Shadows, and Queen of the Dark, which got released in Set 5. Deflation is also a very strong clash buff. You basically cycle one card for removing one of your opponent's clash cards, which is very good. It also helps that Death has one attack, so if your opponent attacks your contender, you can use the clash buff to remove a 3 health clash card with ease. That is also a very hard deck to play, not because of the contender ability, but because of all the micro decisions the deck has you do. Do you need removal right now? Do you prioritize draw power? Can I burst my opponent if I drop Spatial Gateway or Death's Door? It also doesn't help that the deck doesn't have any form of board wipe, so you have to keep up the tempo by removing clash cards as they drop. Considering everything, I still believe that I brought the best deck in the format to deal with every possible contender. My loss in the semifinals was greatly attributed because Levy was able to adapt very well against all of my plays. So it's more of a skill issue rather than a mechanical problem with the deck. So without further ado, let's get this started. Death the Chaos Bringer is a black Harbinger contender with the card effect. When a Death Flash card is defeated or sent to Oblivion, you can engage this contender to draw a card and give a Clash card +1/+1. When she awakens at 10 health, she unlocks the card effect once per turn during primary phase. You can reanimate a 2cc black Flash card, and it gets banished at the end of the turn. It's an okay contender effect that leaves much to be desired. Engage contender to draw a card was pretty standard back in Set 2. Its awakening is as good as its targets, though I kinda wish the health requirement was higher. That is only as good as its clash cards, so the more support it gets, the stronger it gets. For 1-drops, we're starting with 3 copies of Death, the Agent of the Dark. Agent of the Dark's trigger defeat lets it go back to the player's hand if the portal is closed and works as a semi-immortal blocker in the format because of the free portal control during your opponent's turn provided by Somewhere in Quezon City. It combos really well with the contender because you also get a draw when it's defeated. We're also running 2 copies of Death the Overseer because it's a 1cc clash card with 1/1 and flight. You can crash this against a 1-attack contender to immediately trigger the contender ability, or better yet with Spatial Gateway so it bounces back to your hand. We're running 4 copies of our clash buff, Deflating. Basically a -2/-2 and a free card draw if the target clash card is defeated. Moving to 2 drops, we have 3 copies of Bad Omen. This is a very good card to have early game because it taxes each draw from your opponent outside of the draw step and messes up with their tempo. 4 copies of Death the Dreadful. This is our hand refill and sometimes our win con because of his trigger defeat. Target contender loses 2 life and draw a card. Normally, you'd be targeting your contender to draw 2 cards with your contender effect, but in the late game, you can use the trigger defeat on your opponent with Spatial Gateway or Death's Door to potentially burst them down from 18 or 20. We're running 3 copies of Resurging Fire. Resurging Fire is a very good card to play if there's a card in your opponent's Oblivion that you want to play. Very useful against mirrors. And then lastly, we're running 4 copies of our Clash Grounds Spatial Gateway. This Clash Ground gives all Harbingers that are 4cc or less the trigger defeat, pay 1 resource of any color, and return this card to hand. This basically makes all of our Clash cards recyclable. I did consider Forsaken Catacombs at one point, but the problem I had with it was that I didn't have enough good activators for the card, and that my opponent could reanimate their own cards, so I basically had to banish their Oblivion first with Overseer, which I had a hard time doing. For 3 drops, first we have 4 copies of Clarity from the Shadows. This card was released in set 5 and has the effect: during the primary phase, you can tap this card and send a Clash card to Oblivion. She serves as recurring removal in the deck if she survives the next turn, and since it's only 3cc, it also benefits from Spatial Gateway. It does have a downside, which is trigger defeat, which forces you to send another Clash card to Oblivion. We're running 4 copies of Morak. This card has been a staple in many black decks since its release in set 3. It's basically a cheap blocker and search since it enters play from accessory. Somewhere in Quezon City can't negate its trigger enter. We have 1 copy of our unrivaled card, Lord Krong the Barbarous, which I was lucky enough to get an AR from my case, and it looks wonderful. It's a 4/3 with ambush and counterplay or attack effect that lets it send an engaged Clash card to Oblivion. If the Clash card is 4cc or higher, you can reanimate a 2cc discarded card from your Oblivion. If it gets sent to Oblivion from accessory, it gets shuffled back to deck and your opponent discards a card. And we're running 2 copies of our Death's Clash Ground, Death's Door. On enter, you can activate the portal and each contender loses 3 health. Now people always gets confused with this card, I don't know why. The Clash Ground only benefits the controller. If the opponent's Clash card gets removed, the controller gets +1 health. If the controller's Clash card is removed and the portal is open, the opponent loses 1 health. This is one of our win cons and works really well with Death the Dreadful to burst down our opponents. Lastly, we're running 4 copies of Queen of the Dark and 3 copies of Endbringer. Queen of the Dark is a 4/4 with flight, and its cost gets reduced to 3, colorless, if there are 3 or more death cards with different card names in Oblivion. Endbringer sends a Clash card your opponent controls to Oblivion at the start of their turn, and reanimates a Clash card for us at the start of our turn if the portal is open. Now, accessory removal is staple for any competitive deck in Alpha Clash, given the amount of great accessories we have now, so I had to either splash green or white cards in the deck. I did try both colors, but ultimately chose white because it lets me run 4 copies of Controlling the Situation. This is a 1cc trap that engages the Clash card being played. It added an extra protection from the shadows by preventing our opponent the opportunity to attack. And then we're of course running 4 copies of Ancient Protection to spot remove accessories, and lastly 1 bound card. We're running only 1 bound since we can only have 1 of it in our resource and we can search it out with Morak. For sideboard, we're running 4 copies of Home Field Advantage to negate 3cc or higher traps. There was a lot of discussion, but this does include Morak and Lord Krong, the Barbarous. Preventing Morak from entering play is huge because it prevents our opponent from blocking an attack, and more importantly, it prevents them from searching their decks. 4 copies of Sharpshooter Moxie is pretty stable. It has a lot of targets like Bad Omen, 2cc Krong, 1cc Torque, etc. Lastly, we're running 2 copies of Krong, the Ruthless Warlord, for the Necrotic and niche occasions that we proc more than 1 Morak a turn. and a target for our Unrivaled if we come across Genesis deck. It's a shame that this build is a one and done since we won't be seeing this format anytime soon. I am excited to go back to standard format. That is even stronger there since we get back full access to Nanite Assassin, 1cc Pestilence, and I Am Demise. The combos the deck will do are going to be pretty bonga. Even though I didn't win it all this time around, I did enjoy the event because of all the very welcoming community. I'm also very glad that 4 of us from Team Prime 101 made it into the top 16. These are relatively new players that started the game this year. I'm looking forward to more tournaments with them and more Alpha Flash. Until next time,